Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's Fly Tying Friday. Tonight it's just me at the vise, and I'm going to have some fun. I'll be tying a water walker and maybe something else. The weekly tip is going to be a wild parachute. I'm not even sure if I can get it to come out. It's one of these brainstorms that you have in the middle of the night. You know, it's in our household, we suffer from a unique disease called thread wrap virus. We both got the disease. It isn't like some of your households where it's just one of you and the other one's got to put up with the guy with the virus. We both got it. And here's the common thing in our household. I'm laying there in bed looking at the ceiling, 3 o'clock in the morning. You awake? I am now. What if we did? And then it's we did goes from there. And it's so the brainstorm tonight on the parachute, which will come after the water walker, is a 3 o'clock in the morning brainstorm that hasn't been tested in any way, shape, or form, other than it sounded like a good idea. So who knows what's going to happen. Anyway, before I get to the materials, let's take a look at the recipe. Dry fly hook. The thread is going to be, actually, it says brown, and I decided at the last minute I wanted to do gray because I wanted to use grizzly hackle. So that's what we're doing. Tail and wings are going to be deer, though it could be elk. I'm going to do a yarn body, which is going to be part of our tip. Hackle is going to be grizzly, and of course the head is thread. Now let's move over to the materials. And I've already sprayed everything down with my static guard, but you already know about that. Hook is a size 10. Gray thread, I'll just set that over here. I got dubbing. I think I'll just use yarn tonight. We'll talk about how to use yarn and get a nice smooth body out of it. And my hackle, I'll just set that over there. And we're going to talk about the hair just momentarily. I know probably everyone on this call already knows about the proper hair for wings and tails as compared to spinning and so forth. But here is a picture of a white-tailed deer that I got off the internet. Notice the dark hair along the backbone. It's probably a 6 to 8 inch strip all the way down the backbone of this hide. It's dark. As it gets down into the rib area, it gets lighter. Well, we're tying wings and tails on a wolf tonight, so we're not even going to go into all the properties that you look for in the others. I'm just using a piece of hair off the backbone. And we'll just set those pictures aside. Now let's move back to the vise for a minute. And I'm going to start a thread base using my thread as a marking point, telling me where my wings is going to go on the tail and so forth. And I want my wings to end up right about, slightly forward of the 1/3 point. We'll see why here in just a minute. And I'm going to wrap right to the end of the shank and halfway back to the center of what I'm going to call the body area. And now I need some hair. We'll get over here and I'll just cut a bundle off. See how I kind of lift that hair up? I get the amount that I need, grab it and cut it close to the skin so that I don't get a bad stubble field there. For those of you that have not been on before, what I was doing off camera, there was a whole bunch of small fibers and trash down here in the butt end, and I was running my finger like this, fast up and down through the butt end to take those fibers out. What you don't want to do is stroke, pull, try to pull them out, because what you do is you build up static electricity. And at this time of the year, especially here in the Rocky Mountain West, where it's basically desert, it builds up the static electricity really fast. So let me grab my stacker, put the hair in the stacker, and let's line things up. Now on a wolf, there's a certain number of fibers that you need for a tail on any particular size hook. I know some guys that actually count the fibers for each different. I don't do that. I just make a guesstimation, and my guesstimation is based on, in the instance of the tail, it's either the outside circumference of the hook eye or which I do. I give a single twist in my bundle and compare the two. And if it's pretty close, I call that just about right. Or the other method that we use is the gather and pinch technique, which I take my left hand and I just kind of gather the materials. Now I'm coming in from the other direction and gather, and all I'm doing is making sure they're in a nice compressed bundle and then press once. And I want that to be about half the gap to no more than 2/3 of the gap. And that's just about right for the tail. I'm going to measure the tail for length. I got a couple of broken ones in there. Let me get them out. All right. Now measure it for length, set it in place. And here's a place you can get into trouble when you're tying with hair. The way you get into trouble is, see how that all flares back? And now I'm going to try to wrap back, and I'm trying to get through all of this crap that I just flared up. Let me back up. Here's what you should do. When you're tying on hair, start out with snug but not tight wraps. Here's a couple of snug ones. Now I'm going to go back a couple of turns, and you can see I've moved back on the shank. Now I'll bail into it. Really get it tight. And then I'll continue wrapping towards the bend, slightly relaxing because I don't want it to be real tight. Just tight enough to kind of keep it all gathered. And then once I get closer to the center here again, I'm going to cover over those loose wraps that I put early on with tight wraps so that I have a good anchor point. But I temporarily use those lighter holding wraps to keep the waste fibers out of my way. Okay, now I'm going to wrap forward over those trimmed ends to the point where I'm going to pick up my hair for the wing. Back over at the bundle of hair, I'm going to need a little bit more. And we'll talk about how I gauge that as well. And again, on my way back to the vise, I'm going to just stop at the waste bin. And I did the same thing. There was a bunch of crud in here and I got rid of it. Okay, good. I'm going to slip back over now to the materials because I added a piece over there. I should have got it out in the first place. I should have realized that probably not everybody has seen this demonstration before. So for the rest of you that have already seen this, go get yourself a beverage of some kind. I'm drinking tea, but you all can have whatever you want. And we're going to talk about, this is the dark hair up along the backbone. Moving on down, a little further down on the animal, it's a little darker, but it gets lighter as it goes on down towards the belly area. What you want to look for in the fly shop is, number one, if they have full hides, and we'll cut the pieces for you. There's a few places that will, but not very many. But if they will, then you tell them what you're looking for. And that's the dark hair off of along the backbone. And that usually is about 6 to 8 inch strip down the backbone. And you can see if the backbone is right here where this finger is, and I gave a guy a piece of this hide, so it really is a piece about like that missing that you see between these two, then you can see that 8 inches on either side of the backbone takes it down to about here. Now, what I want you to notice, I'm going to pick this up, is we have the fairly dark hair at the top part of the fiber, and it starts getting lighter towards the bottom. And let's work our way down. Now you notice that it's about half and half. As we get more down into this area, it's 1/4 dark, 3/4 light. And as you work the way down, it gets down to the point where it's just the tips and then it's all light. Okay. This is spinning hair. This is the hair that you want for wings and tails. What you want, if you can find it, is hair that has a light to dark ratio of 50 to 60%. And as you can see, this one is probably more like 80%. It's only a small amount along the base here. And here, this is still about 60 until we get down into here. Now, even this stuff down in here where it has a really light butt end, if you're tying 16 and 18 wolves, the stuff that you'll be tying with right on the very tip is still dark and you'll be good. But what you look for is in those 3x5 packages is you're looking for hair that's at least 50%, 60% dark. Does that answer your question? Let me grab something. Now, this is a hook for the next fly. And I'll just move it down like this. And you know why I did that? Because I need a gauge for my wing. You'll see why in a minute here. I'm going to tilt my hair stacker in the opposite direction that I did for the tail, because this is going to go on the hook pointing in the other direction. And I'm going to measure it for length. And one of the things that I have an awful time with is getting my wings the right length. So what I do is I tie them on longer than they should be. This one is probably 25% long. And then I measure it against an existing hook so I can get the right length on my wing. And now I'm just going to go ahead. Now notice that that hair is down on the side of the hook. Now I'm going to tighten and allow thread torque to just roll that into position right up on top of the hook. Okay, and I'm getting ready to trim my waist. I want to make sure that. Okay, good. Now I'm going to bring my waist up at about a 45 angle, come in from the offside, lay my scissors flat along the shank so that I get a really severe cut on those waist ends, because I want to blend the heavier or thicker bundle of wing hair in with the tail. And I did a poor job of that, very poor. But we will work our way on. Okay, now here is a place where you can get into trouble with any hair wing fly. And that's the tire that says, okay, good. Well, I want those wings to stand up. And so they wrap a thread dam in front and the wings stand up pretty good now. But a week later, when you open your fly box, they all have done that. They're tipping forward. Well, let me show you how to fix that. We're going to stand it up a little bit at a time. Next third of the bundle, do it in about thirds. And now I'll wrap a thread dam, and all that thread dam is holding up is the last 1/3. Now, when you open your fly box in a week or so, those wings are going to be right there. Now I'm going to go ahead and divide my wings, and I've got a special vise here that allows me to flip things around a little bit so that you can see what I'm doing. There you go. That's a pretty good. And let's make sure we get them divided nice and even. And most of the time, a wolf is considered to have a deer wing and tail, or an elk wing and tail. They can go either way. All right, now I'm going to wrap around each wing bundle.
One more question, Al.
Okay.
What was the title of the book you mentioned?
Oh, maybe I got lucky and made a book sale. It's called Tying Hair Wing Flies by Gretchen and Al Beatty. And you'll find it on Amazon. Just go to the Amazon website, you type Gretchen Beatty books in the search engine, and you'll end up there. Or you can go to my website and you can get a signed copy through the website. All right, now this is a poorly done one because my wings got too far forward when I got to talking with you all, and I didn't pay enough attention. But it'll still give us something to work on as far as our parachute hackle. Now I'm going to start out. We're gonna need 2 hackles, one for each wing. In fact, let me take a look at something here. I'm going to have to make that post a little taller. And throw a little bit of rebar in that post. You start wrapping those parachutes and okay, now I want you to notice that I'm leaving the wings spread pretty far. They're going to get pushed back together, but for now, for the construction of the next couple of steps, we're going to have to leave those sticking out to the sides a bit. By the way, again, John Kreff, thank you so much for keeping track of the chat. Appreciate that. Okay.
You bet.
All right. Now I've got several hackles here, and I've got two that are about the same length. That way they won't be quite so frustrating to work with. I'll take these other two and set them aside in case I drop something in the waste bin and can't find it, like I did just there. Been doing that all day for some reason. The waste bin in my materials is like a magnet today. All right. Now I'm going to start. Okay, here's a rule on this particular fly because we're going to be doing a parachute. Okay, for right now, let's just ignore the fact that there's a near side wing. We're going to be tying a parachute on this post sticking up right there. And because we want to have our hackles come around the post and down the center of the fly. That's the way you have to do the thing. So it comes around the post and down the center of the fly towards the eye. And that's the way all the wraps will be made. So that means that this particular hackle is going to be tied on and wrapped counterclockwise. That means on the off side of the hook, this one, we're setting ourselves up and we want the hackle pointing back. It'll be tied to the outside of the offside wing. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is that I'm setting up to get this hackle to wrap counterclockwise. So I am going to wrap around the post, setting it up so it's tied to the top of the parachute platform, if you will, wrapping down. And so now that one's attached to the top of the parachute platform on the offside wing. I'll just leave that one hanging. Now what we're going to do is, because we want the same result on the near side wing, we want it to come around the post and go straight towards the hook eye. That means it will be wrapped clockwise. I told you this was a pain in the you-know-what, so now you understand why. So I'm just going to tie that one in place. Okay, now. Now there we are. We've got one, the near side one pointing forward, but it's tied to the inside of the wing. The offside one is tied to the outside of the wing and pointing back. Is that confusing enough or not? In weeks past, I've shown you how to take the kinks out of the yarn. Tonight, I'm going to show you that you can, with a little bit of finessing, you can just use the yarn with the kinks in it and turn out a really nice looking body. There we go. Now, what I'm going to do is, with really wide open turns, move my thread to the back of the hook. And it'll sit there waiting for this yarn to reach it, because this is the yarn body. I want you to notice that I'm getting a pretty nice looking yarn body there. In fact, it even almost looks like a dub body. And I still got crinkles in there. Well, the reason I'm able to is because I'm giving this a twist, and there's a point where you twist the material and you can see the fibers just line up. And even though it's all kinky, you can.
I couldn't tell. Did you figure eight that between the two wings once or not?
Not yet. I did not. Each one is individually tied to its own wing. There's no crisscrossing yet or anything like that. We'll get to that. Okay, now I've tied off that body at the back, and I'm going to rib forward with my thread. Now there's a gray thread and gray body. You won't see anything until you get wet, until the fly gets wet. And I'm going to leave this hanging at the back of the wing post. Let's see. No, it's got to be at the front because I'm going to wrap the offside hackle first. So I am going to start wrapping the first parachute. I think you can kind of start getting the idea as to why this is not available in the fly shops. Even the factories overseas are not particularly crazy about tying it.
So that one goes on counterclockwise.
I'm sorry, what?
You're tying that counterclockwise.
Correct. This one is counterclockwise, the other one is clockwise. That's because you want the hackle to end up, let me get my pointer. You want your hackle to end up coming between the wings, and the tie off would be at the hook eye, but I don't tie off at the hook eye. I tie off at the wing base. And that, in fact, the offside one is tied off right now. Now I'm going to wrap the near side, and it's clockwise. And now I'm going to go around that wing and anchor it off with a couple of 3 turns and let, now I've got it 2 applications, one hackle pointing forward and one back. Well, let me trim them off. Set that aside. I'll trim this one off. And now I'm going to flip this over and use my half hitch tool to put on a whip finish. After I put on a couple half hitches, now the whip finish and another one. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to trim the thread, and now the wings get pushed back together. And let's see what we got. You've got a fly with a platform. Let's see if I can get this. You can see that you've got a footprint on the water that's much more, shall we say, it's much more of it like the real insect than the hackle that's just wrapped around a post for a straight flat parachute, or for a regular hackle that's wrapped around the hook shank. Setting a foam right here. Yeah, I'm going to do that and we'll see how that looks. And there you can see how that sets on the water. It's an absolutely phenomenal fishing fly, and it's an equally phenomenal fly as far as times taking to tie. But we might have an option. We're going to find out whether we do have an option. And I have what I hope might be another way of doing it. Anyway, we're going to get started. The same thing. I'm going to try to do a better job of my wings this time. That really ticked me off. I don't usually do that. So I'm going to pay more attention to my tying and less to talking. We'll just pop right over here now and get some more of that hair. And I'll pick up the pace a little bit too, so that, and we'll put the hair in the stacker. Okay, well, I'm back now. I've treated myself with a good stiff spray of static guard, and now we'll add a couple of broken tips in there that I wanted to get rid of. Now I'll just tie on my tail. Remember, we're going to tie the tail on with snug wraps to start, and then put tight wraps on as I go towards the back of the hook. Okay, snug but not real tight. We'll take care of that later. Snug, go back a couple of turns, really bail into it. And now I'm going to work my way to the back, controlling the flare. And now I'm going to really get back into it again and tighten it up. And all it ends up being held in place from about this point right here on towards the center with really tight wraps. But you put them on in steps so that you don't have to deal with all that hair that's flared back into your in your way. Now I'll get out another bundle of hair here for the wings. It's not enough. There we go. Now I'm back. It's got all the waste in it, but I want you to notice that there is a slight curve to that hair, and it won't stack real good. It'll be okay, but only okay until I straighten it. And I'm going to use my thumbnail and forefinger together to put a series of crimps on the outside of the bend until it straightens up that hair. And now it's straight. Now I'm going to grab it by its tips, and I'll be back in a moment. Be out over the waste bin for a minute here. All right, I'm going to measure my wing for length a little bit longer than I want it to be. And I'll just compare it to another hook, and I'll pull on that wing until it's the length of the shank of another hook, same size. Now it's down on my side of the hook, and I'm just going to go ahead now, and as I tighten up and roll that bundle right up on top of the hook. This time it turned out okay. Good. I haven't tied that bad of a looking wing, and I can't tell you how long. I'll have to be more careful. And I went through that bundle in four units. That's how much it happened to turn out. But that'll keep that wing standing up real nice and straight. Now we'll just turn this so I can see the back of that. Wing so I can get a nice even division. Okay, there we go. Now let's wrap around each several times. Okay, now here's something that we're going to have to do, because what I'm going to do is do a crisscross parachute over these wings, hopefully. And what I need to do now is the opposite of what we normally do. Normally we crisscross through the wings over the top to pull the wings together, right? Well, this time we're going to have to crisscross under, because we're going to be wrapping a parachute hackle above, and it'll just collapse those wings if we don't put additional support on the underside. There's going to be quite a lot of pressure on those wings as we... Okay, that gives me a pretty good platform on which to wrap. Whoops, sorry for bumping the camera there, folks. Now I'm just going to go ahead and I think I'll get another piece of this yarn. That seemed to work pretty good. And this time, instead of wrapping it backwards, I'll just wrap it forward. Now I've got some extra long hackle that I'm going to use here. Oh, that looks like a good one right there. Now, when you wrap the yarn, I want you to notice that It's got a little twist in it, but if I give it a little twist right there, I don't know if you can see it or not, but I'm going to zoom in. Now, it normally is kind of twisted like that. And what I do is I line those fibers up. You see how they kind of fall in line? And even though it's crinkly or crinkly, and then I reline those fibers up every time I get once around the hook. Instead of using the hot air on it. The hot air works very well, but this is just another way to end up with a nice looking body. Whoops, missed it. There we go. Now let me zoom back out. All right, now the hackle. Okay, the fun starts. Now what I'm going to do is figure 8 between these wings. See if you can see what I'm doing there. Let me tilt them just a little. There we go. Now you can see them better. Except I can't see. I better. Okay, now I can see what's going on. Interesting. Now I'll get my half hitch tool, put on a whip finish. Now let's see what we look like here. Got a couple of bad, got to take a little bit of practice on tying this particular style of hackle, but let's take a look at it from the more of a downward tilt to the parachute rather than the flat platform that we normally see. But yeah, got a couple of wild ones there. Got to figure out the process of tying all that off.